Hey everybody, Rhadamant here. Thanks for tuning in to episode 2 of Stationeers. So last we left off, we were about to do some smelting in the furnace. So let's go and switch the belts out so that we have access to our oxides and our volatiles. So I'm just waiting for the last of the residual temperature to go away due to the sunset, and we are just about cool enough. If you don't wait, what will end up happening is the oxides and volatiles will melt in your hand. Not all at once, but eventually. So what we want to do is to put oxides and volatiles in one hand and split them off at a 2-to-1 ratio here. And then, as you can see right now, its current contents is the oxide, and because our furnace should be valve set to off, we can go ahead and melt it, and it will stay inside the contents, and then put the volatiles in, and combined will generate heat and pressure, which is exactly what we want for creating our steel. Now we have to be careful, as I mentioned, about putting the iron and the coal in the right proportions. If you get the proportions wrong, you'll end up making reagent rather than making steel. So it's a 3-to-1 ratio. Right now, as you can see, it doesn't make anything, and as I melt the last of the iron, it will say it makes steel. There we go. We'll produce 200 grams of steel. Done. Pull the handle, and there's our steel. And we only really need to make one big batch of steel. And now, while this furnace is still hot, I'm going to attempt to smelt down some copper and some gold. So there's the copper, and as you can see, that is a lot faster and more efficient than putting it through the arc furnace. And gold as well. Now, every time I do this, what will end up happening is the temperature of the furnace comes down because the metals that I'm putting in are cold, and it cools off the furnace. So I'm trying to smelt the metals that take a long time to process in an arc furnace, like copper and gold first, and then we can do iron last. Of course, I have a lot more volatiles and oxides in my mining belt. So as you can see here, this is a good example. The furnace is now not probably warm enough to smelt this iron. So the iron I just ejected. If I wanted to warm this furnace back up, I could add some more 2-to-1 ratio of volatiles to oxides. So 2 volatiles to every oxide. And that's going to be pretty much true for every single compound that you want to make, except for Invar. Invar is the exception here. Oh, this never really heated up. I think what ended up happening was that the oxides and volatiles didn't combust. At this point, what I'd likely have to do is just add some more volatiles. Now, if you wanted to make sure... No, I need more oxides for sure, because our oxides had combusted. Oxides are like the oxygen, and as you can see, that heated up quite nicely. And let's do the last of our iron. And done. All right, beautiful. Now, what we were getting the steel for primarily was a battery. There is, in my opinion, not much reason to add automated power unless you have a lot of storage. So let's go ahead and put these ingots into the electronics printer, and this printer is going to be where we manufacture the battery. Now, if you want to add to an additional power network, you're going to have wire cutters in your hand, and that allows you to expand from it. And there we go. Let's power this on. And then the first thing we're going to do is let's use the search filter for kit battery. Kit battery requires 20 steel, which is exactly why we manufactured the steel. And I don't have enough gold to make another one. That's fine. Now, if I put this down, we can see what's going on. There is an input, which is on the single side, and then there's an output with data on the other side. So what I'm going to do is turn on my jetpack, and let's go ahead and plop our battery just like this. So we have output facing our panels and our, well, not our panels, but our work benches and whatnot. Then one other thing I want to make is a hydraulic pipe bender, but that actually probably could wait. So let's go and start to do the automated circuitry for the solar panel. So first things first, we need 2 sensors. I might actually run out of gold doing this. I forget if I have any more gold stashed around. Oh, you know what? I actually have some gold on my auto lathe. Alright, so we have 1 sensor, like 1 more sensor. There we go. 2 sensors, good. And any of these manufacturing things that we have. The next thing we're going to want is 4 input-output logic circuits. This is going to get a little complicated pretty quickly, but I will try to explain what I'm doing the best I can. However, there are plenty of guides online to fully explain the solar logic process. So you don't need to rely on just me to do it. So input-output allows you to read values like solar angle and also to write values to a solar power panel. So basically what we're trying to do is we have 2 sensors, one for vertical sun position, one for horizontal sun position. We will read both the vertical and horizontal with 2 of the input outputs, and then we will process that with math and with some memory, and then write to our solar power panels. So next is I want 2 things of memory, and we'll get those cranking out. Now, if you're wondering what point of reference I'm using the Stationeerswiki.com Solar Logic Circuits Guide, the first one. Now, some of this isn't applicable if you are on the moon or in space because horizontal sun tracking isn't necessary. So the last thing I'm going to do is grab math. Oh, what is it called? Processor. A logic processor, and we need 2 of those. As you can see, our furnace is outgassing. Alright, so this is all of the logic that I'll need for automating solar power panels. However, I will need some additional cables, actually quite a lot of them. So I'm going to let these spam out pretty quick. And then while I do that, I'm going to tilt my solar power panel manually, maybe for the last day ever, in order to capitalize on some of the sun that's about to rise. As you can see, it's almost sunrise. Checking my battery. My suit's battery is on high. I have plenty of battery charge left in my suit. So this is east, north, west. So north is my printers. I'm going to need to memorize that, or at least keep it as a point of reference for later, because what's going to happen is the positioning of my sensors will matter based upon my cardinal direction positioning. Alright, so that's probably enough cabling for now. That probably isn't enough to actually complete the whole task, but it's fine. So the first thing I want to do is put down some sensors. So, as far as the sensor network goes, I want to actually construct a few more frames. So 4 more frames, and we will use our welder to weld sheets to them. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Put the welder away, and then put the iron sheets away. Yep, so my solar power panel is charging this battery. That's good. So first things first, sensors. So if the power port on my solar power panel, and I guess I can make one more solar power panel for now. Eventually I'm going to want more than just the one. But I can actually afford 3 more. Not that I'm going to make all of them all at once. So as we set up this solar power panel, we're going to have the power side face east. Because the power side here is going to want to charge this battery. Right? So if the power side of the solar power panel faces east, the horizontal sensor the power port needs to face south. So this sensor will need to face south. And then I'm going to set up another sensor right here. This one, it doesn't actually matter which direction it faces at all. It just needs to face up. All right. Now the first thing I need to do for this sensor is it's by default set to, and let's just go ahead and angle this solar power panel while we're standing here so that we can charge this battery a little bit better. This needs to be set to horizontal tracking, not vertical tracking. It will be vertical tracking by default. And let's go ahead and eat a little cereal bar. Grab a labeler. All right, we already have our labeler in the backpack. That's good. So the way to do this is horizontal tracking for the daylight sensor. All right, first things first. Let's go and construct that solar power panel up top so that we can start charging the big battery. Because I'm going to want some charge in that big battery. So this bad boy gonna get constructed. And then we'll run some power to it. All right, and flick it on the side, and as you can see, it's already charging because this solar power panel is sort of angling the right way. It doesn't need to be perfect. We just want to give the big battery just a little bit of charge, so that should work. And here the big battery is charging. This big battery can hold a lot more power than the little mobile batteries that we have, these little battery cells. All right. And the reason why I wanted that to power on is the next thing I want to do is grab my power controller that Yep, here's the power controller. And I want to set up a power controller specifically for my solar tracking. So what I'm going to do is isolate it so that, oh, this is upside down. That this, there we go, is totally isolated from the rest of my grid network for logic reasons. So the reason behind this, if you're wondering, is because power controllers will isolate objects from the rest of, how to explain this more eloquently. When you're trying to set up logic networks, you're not going to want to see every single possible object on your network because it will just be too much, too many choices to make. Imagine a giant computer network and having to look at every little piece of that computer network could be annoying. So what I'm doing now is isolating my solar logic so that it will eventually have its own battery. And in fact, we can give it its own battery. I don't intend to use this tracker, so I'll just grab the battery out of the tracker and toss it into the APC here. So we're isolating this data from the rest of our network so that it's easier to control. So what I want to do is change this little sensor here so that, oops, that should have been a writer. Let's fix that. So that it is tracking horizontal angle and not vertical angle. All right, so to do that, we'll need to put a little memory down and a logic writer. And then when this logic writer and memory, let's wire it all up to look something like this. It needs to connect to the sensor. And then this needs to connect to the memory. And this is all very temporary. Oops, and then this should also connect to the top for power. So let's add that in. Okay. So now this logic writer, we're going to grab our screwdriver. And I'll face it this way. On input, we're going to grab the memory, this memory. And for output, we're going to output to the daylight sensor. And we're going to output mode to the daylight sensor. And then on this memory here, I'm going to increase by 1. When we turn this on, as you can see, its mode is now horizontal, whereas this one is default, which is vertical. So now we're getting both the horizontal and vertical tracking information. And once the mode is set, you don't need to keep writing to it. It writes it once, and once is enough. So now we have horizontal and vertical solar sensors. Now we have to process that information, but before I do that, I'm going to change my battery with the full one. And not forget to angle this bad boy, and let's angle this bad boy too. And like I said, this might be the last day I have to do this manually. All right. So then I'm going to set up my solar tracking over here. Let's see. We're going to want to set it up like this. We're going to have a logic reader, a logic write. That should be a batch writer. So a writer will write to one single object. A batch writer will write to multiple. So we're going to eventually write data to all of the solar power panels, hence the batch writer. Then we're going to need another logic reader and another batch writer. I'm going to add some memory in here. The batch reader and logic reader don't have ports in the bottom, so I can use the bottom slot to put memory in. And then last but not least, my math units, my processors. These have bottom slots when they're logic math, and we're going to add 2 of them. Then what I'm going to do is grab my labeler and start labeling stuff so that I'm not confused as to what they are. So this is going to be the whole... I'm going to Haas reader. Use shortened. Haas writer, vert reader, vert writer, memory 75, and then if we aim at one of these little screw heads, we can actually set it to 75, and then memory 1.5, do the same thing here. This will be called Math 1 and Math 2. Alright, turn off the labeler. Put this bad boy away. Now the next goal is to wire all of this up as efficiently as I can. So maybe a 3-way corner would do. And I'm going to just sort of interconnect all of it. I think what I'm going to do is actually move this daylight sensor a little bit, just so it's closer to where the cabling needs to go. And we might not actually end up with enough cables. We'll have to see. And in fact, what I think I'm going to do is just have it corner here. And now we're going to start to seriously wire this up. So this will be a 4-way junction. And another 4-way junction. And then a 3-way junction. T-junction. And the top here is going to be all T-junctions. Except for the ends. Oh no, this is going to be T-junction 2. And let's keep adding T-junctions. And we're out of cables. So let's manufacture some additional cables. It does require a lot of cabling, but in the end, it will generate power automatically, which will be very, very, very sweet. Or not automatic, well, it won't generate power automatically, but it will track the sun automatically. So while the sun is up in the sky, it will track it very, very efficiently and generate us oodles and oodles of power. Which is a lot more efficient than having to search for coal to burn, in my opinion. Many, many, many times more efficient, in fact. Okay, I'm going to start wiring it up as that goes. So another junction. Now to save a little bit on cabling, I'm going to have it look like this. These have a bottom port. But as long as it's all one big cable, we're all set. And this can be junctions. And a corner, and a corner. Ooh, my character's hungry. Now, there is a power limit to cabling. They can't carry more than 5,000 volts, or they short circuit. So that's something to keep in mind. Let's go ahead and eat another cereal bar. Yum, yum. But we're not going to exceed that for a long time. That's pretty high requirements. So let's set up our solar logic now. So this reader is the horizontal reader. Oh, I also really ought to label my sensors too. I don't know which one is vert sensor and horizontal sensor by default. On the network, they would just both look like sensor. Oops, I nudged you into my way. All right. So as you can see, the horizontal sensor is still set up to horizontal. As long as we don't accidentally write to it, that will stay true. So the input for this reader is going to be the horizontal sensor, because this is this horizontal reader. And we're going to read the solar angle. So if you power this on, as you can see, negative 60-ish is the horizontal angle. And if we confirm by looking at the horizontal sensor, once the sun is up, they should be the same value. Now, for the batch writer here, the input will be the horizontal sensor, or the horizontal reader, excuse me. And then the output, we're going to have to wire up right now. So let's wire up this output. The output is going to be the horizontal angle of this solar power panel. So the output type will be solar panels and will be horizontal angle. So now when we turn this on, as you can see, the solar power panel starts to move on its own, because we are writing the solar angle of 29, and then this thing is going to be angled 29 degrees, which is tracking the sun. Now the next thing we want is for vertical. So let's do the logic reader for vert sensor for solar angle. There it is. And then we'll have to do some math to it. So basically I could explain the math, but given that I'm not a mathematician, it's best that you could Google it if you're really curious. What you're going to want to do is to set it up like this. So this input will be 75, and this input will be the vertical reader. And we're going to want to subtract them from one another. So memory 75 minus vertical reader. So here is 155 and 80. Now this next math unit, math 2, we'll set up to take math 1 and take the memory of 1.5 and divide them by each other. So this is math 1 divided by memory 1.5. I'm just making sure that the memories are all set up right. And then the last is to take math 2 and then output to the solar power panels of vertical angle. And turn that on. And when the sun comes up, you should see that this starts tracking it properly. So the next thing I'm going to want to do is to move this solar power panel so that it can benefit from the network I just set up. So let's go ahead and do that. So the power has to face one way and the data faces the other. We'll put the sheet on there. And then grab our wire cutter tools. And we're going to want to run some cables out to it. Like that. As you can see, this one will automatically start moving into position. And then at the moment, we are not actually capturing the power from this thing. So let's do that next. And now the power from these two panels will go into this battery. And then this battery can also, let's set this up very crudely. Come on, rotate properly. To power this thing, but I think I'm actually going to move this APC. I don't actually like where it's placed on the floor like this. That was sort of temporary. So what we'll do is we can put the APC up here instead. So let's get rid of some of these cables and move the APC to its semi-permanent position. So we've got input. Let's actually reverse that. So we've got the input here. Oops. I meant to use the crowbar there. Input on one. Oh, no, that's output. Again, it's backwards. Input and output. Perfect. And use the crowbar, open it up. And plop our large battery in there and turn that baby on. And then we can run this cable out to our manufacturing benches so that they too have power. This path of cable is actually far less efficient now. So we can pull up this cable and make it nice and straight. There we go. So now these will turn on. And if I look up here, as you can see, as the sun rises, these will become more efficient. When the sun is below horizon or just cresting, it's not fully efficient. But what I'm going to do is actually add yet another solar power panel. In fact, I'll do 2 more. We have the resources to do it. Nope, we have the resources to do 1 more. That's fine. Power is your first large bottleneck, and then comes food thereafter. So the fact that I have power done in a pretty timely manner makes me pretty happy. I'm also going to want a few more cables to wire up this last solar power panel. So I know that was a lot of information setting up solar logic, but it is a lot better to do this than to constantly have to wrench a bunch of solar power panels to angle the sun, or alternatively have to find coal to burn. So let's get data and power out of this panel. And now this one will automatically angle towards the sun. And as you can see, the efficiency of these panels, 98% efficient. That's pretty good. That's a lot of power. And that power is being fed to this big battery and also to this cell here that I'm able to swap to again. And now our suit should not run out of power. We should always have some power for the suit, which is great. I'm just going to complete that panel there. And, you know, actually, I think I'm just about out of time. So, this has been an episode fully about solar power and solar tracking. If you have any questions, and I'm sure there will be quite a few, drop me a line. I'm going to leave a comment about the guide I used and pin it up as the top comment. So if you have questions about that, let me know. This is not exactly a tutorial series, but given that the solar tracking is applicable, this kind of solar tracking works for both Mars and Europa. It will also work for the moon and for space, but you don't need to use it for the moon or space because the horizontal tracking is unnecessary. So you can just leave the horizontal bits out of it entirely if you so choose. All right, guys. Well, if you have any other sort of feedback, drop me a line, and I do hope that you tune in next time. Thank you all for watching. Adios.